Hi, this is the BMAT approach to threat modeling at Black Hat Asia 2021. I'm Adam Shostak, and this is a talk today about a particular problem which I see over and over again when I'm talking to people about how they're adapting threat modeling to their organization. And so I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Tell you a little bit about myself before I get started. So I do a lot of work in threat modeling, wrote a book on the subject, created the Elevation of Privilege card game to help people learn to threat model. I advise Arius Risk, a company that builds software. Earlier in my career, I built what is now the Microsoft SDL threat modeling tool. I'm on the review board here at Black Hat. I helped to create the CVE. And I run a consulting company, Shostak & Associates, that helps people to threat model. And today, this is really focused on conflict between security and other teams. And I'm going to give you a quick introduction to threat modeling in case you're not familiar with how we do it today. There's been tremendous progress made in how we structure the way we threat model over the last few years. And I'm going to tell you about the BMAT approach. And I want to tell you, don't bother Googling BMAT. It's not something that people have heard about in this form before today. And so I will explain it later on in the talk where the name comes from. Let's get going. So I want to start out by talking about security teams and conflict. This is something I hear over and over again, is that the security team is in the midst of yet another escalation with development, with operations. I was talking to a buddy of mine and he said, Adam, how do I get these folks to stop fighting? But there's really this pattern where security is fighting with ops, security is fighting with software development. Security needs to learn to talk to the business. And you know, something I need to say here, which is that when we're talking to our friends, something that there's a sort of an old chestnut, that what we say is the one thing that your failed relationships have in common is you. And there's three things we can do about this. One, we can keep fighting. Two, we can go find a new relationship and hope it works better. Or three, we can think about how our behavior might be contributing to the problem. And spoiler alert, that's what this talk is about, is the way in which a particular pattern of behavior by security teams leads to needless conflict and reduces our ability to protect the businesses in the way in which we hope to protect them. So let me give you a quick intro to threat modeling. This is Adam's 2-minute intro for those of you who are not familiar. Bear with me if this is review. So let me start. What is threat modeling? Threat modeling is very simple. It's the use of models to help us think about threats. And a model is an abstraction. We get rid of some details so we can see the forest, not the trees. And a threat, the way I'm using it, we use it in a lot of ways in security. The way I use it is the promise of a future problem, especially if we don't do something to fix it. He threatened to beat me up if I didn't give him my lunch money. That's a threat. And in computer security, there might be a threat that someone's going to brute force logins on this particular API, or they're going to reuse stolen credentials to get in over this API. And then we might build defenses to deal with that anticipated problem. And so threat modeling is a powerful set of techniques that we use. And sometimes people confuse it with threat intelligence. Let me compare and contrast. Threat intelligence is collecting data, often indicators of compromise, IP addresses, domains, hashes, and using them to find attacker activity. It is something we do when a system has been built and when it's operational. In contrast, threat modeling is about anticipating these problems, perhaps including realizing that we might have problems and that we might need to react to them, and so designing our systems to deal with them. And, really want to emphasize that threat modeling is actually pretty easy. Many of us picked it up by osmosis. We learned it without having to have a huge amount of structure. And today it's helpful to have some structure. And the structure I like to use the most is what I call the 4-question framework. The 4-question framework is 4 simple questions. What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? Did we do a good job? And if you simply ask these questions, you're doing threat modeling. And we can get very specific in the ways in which we answer them. Excuse me. We can get very specific in the ways we answer these questions. So, for example, as we ask what can go wrong, we might use STRIDE. STRIDE's a mnemonic, stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. And this helps us bring structure to how we think about what can go wrong. So that is my 2-minute introduction to threat modeling. And let me tell you, threat modeling is full of traps. That might be pushing the forward button on your remote control slightly too early, but there are much more important traps which you can fall into. And it's a trap because it's easy to fall into these things. We're going along with good intent and we make a mistake. Or we don't even make a mistake, we just fall into a pit. And threat modeling is so full of traps because it's easy. Because we learn it from osmosis, the ways in which we fall into traps are legion, and this talk is about one particular trap that keeps getting us, the BMAT approach. So let's talk about what that is. As we do, I want to put this in a little bit more context. I created the Jenga model of threat modeling. And the idea is we have at the top a secure product delivery system, and we support that with a set of building blocks. And unlike in Jenga, where the goal is to have the tower not fall down, our goal is to build up a tower that's stable. And we do so with 3 types of blocks. We do so with technical building blocks, things like STRIDE and data flow diagrams, the software we use to threat model, the mental tools we use to structure our thinking. There are organizational building blocks, things like metrics and executive support and how we file bugs. And there are interpersonal skills, things like humility and active listening and a constructive approach to engineering. And so this particular talk is organizational. It's about conflict that happens in the way organizations interact, in the way they structure their threat modeling work. And I want to be really clear. This is a conflict that emerges from good intent. Nobody here is saying, I'm trying to make a problem, but this conflict happens over and over. And so the tooling we use in threat modeling is a little bit different. So I think about this in terms of how much engagement does each engineer need to have and how much attention is required. So over in this corner is the secure development lifecycle, the framework, and most engineers don't need to pay attention to it at all. Then in the middle is a set of tools. If you're not familiar with these tools, don't worry about it. These tools are all the software we use in threat modeling, the static analysis, the fuzzers, the testing tools. And most engineers don't need to pay close attention. They don't need to be really involved in how these work. They get a bug, they deal with the bug, and they might need to know something about how the tool works. But if they don't really understand it, it's okay. They're managing one discrete little issue. And then threat modeling is a little different in that it often requires a little bit more thinking on the part of the participants. And so that brings me to how BMAD causes problems. And again, you do not know what BMAD stands for yet, and that's okay. Don't be mad. So the basic scenario is this. The developer comes along and says, hey, can you help us secure this system? And the security team, represented here by an awesome little ninja dude, says, sure, bring me a diagram. And the ninja person is the security team, not the attacker here. Anyway, the security person says, bring me a diagram. And the developer says, okay, sure, I can bring you a diagram. You know, what they're really thinking, what the heck is a diagram? I'm a developer, I'm not an artist. What does the diagram look like? And so they go off and they diligently create a diagram, like a blueprint of everything they're doing, and they hone it, and they put it through a review cycle, and they bring back this great diagram, and the security team says, oh my gosh, let me tell you about all the problems we've got here. And the security team says, what? I did what you told me. So there's some things that happen here that are important to understand. One is that the security team's view of what's happening is that all these folks are showing up saying, hey, can you help us secure this system? Can you help us secure this system? The security team says, bring me diagrams, and then they wait. And as they wait, there's so many things for them to go off and pwn. There's so many systems to break. There's so many security issues to find that they're off doing that other work, waiting for the team to come back with a diagram. And what they're thinking is that diagram is going to be like a whiteboard diagram. It's going to be an early thing where we can have a conversation about the security problems that exist. And what we have here, is a failure to communicate. And this is common, and you've probably seen diagrams of these swings where the customer wants a tire swing and they don't get it. And I picked this particular one because security doesn't even show up. This is not really a security-specific failure to communicate. The failure to communicate is not a problem that's unique to security. It happens all over the place in business. But this is a talk about a particular security failure. So what's happening here is miscommunication about expectations. Do I want that blueprint or do I want a whiteboard? It's miscommunication about roles and responsibilities. Whose job is creating the diagram? What is the thing that happens? Is it a review or a dialogue about what we're going to go do? And, you may be saying, oh God, this is so boring, Adam. I just want to pop systems. There's so many things out there. There's so many cross-site scripting issues in my system. There's so much SQL injection. Why are we talking about this? And the answer is because threat modeling gives you an opportunity to be structured, systematic, and comprehensive in how you deal with security issues. And instead of engaging in those good conversations, we're having these fights. And so BMAD stands for bring me a diagram. Those 4 simple words are at the core of this problem. Because when I tell someone to bring me a diagram and I don't communicate clearly about what we're going to do next, all of these problems just roll out of those 4 little words. So there are some contributors to the problem. Again, security teams are highly loaded, and especially security teams cannot hire enough of those application security folks who have real software design experience, who can talk fluently about design trade-offs. Security teams are learning about threat modeling today, and I'm watching a lot of really exciting progress in the field. But one of the things that's happening is we don't have enough experience with great threat modeling rollouts to see that this diverges from the good pattern. And When I talk about threat modeling, I talk about 4 questions. What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? And there's some folks who say, hey, teams should be focused on doing retrospectives anyway. We don't need to ask if we do a good job. And there's some popular advice, and I don't want to point fingers. We've had the conversation in private, but there's some good advice out there that eliminates the 4th question, and in eliminating it, in not making the time and the space for the question of did we do a good job in threat modeling in particular, the problem recurs because there's no time to focus on it. And so I think it's really important for you to understand that as you get started threat modeling, you should spend as much time on retrospectives as you do on doing the technical work. You don't have to do it for very long, but doing it as you get started really helps you identify problems, including but not limited to this one. The other thing that's happening is development teams are getting more and more agile. And so instead of doing 2-week sprints, we're seeing CI/CD. When is there time to create a diagram? The diagram gets created after the software gets shipped. Someone will do a technical debt retro. We're going to pay down the debt. We're going to draw what we've just built. We're going to draw what we've shipped. You can threat model what you've just shipped. It's much more useful to threat model while it's in that early stage, that whiteboard stage, that sketch stage. And so let's talk about how to avoid BMAD in specific. And I'm going to use the Jenga model again, the model of technical, organizational, and interpersonal skills. So technical, as we talk about what are we working on, moving from bring me a diagram to whiteboards is super valuable. And there are lots of collaborative drawing tools that work today during the pandemic for great collaborative analysis of this is what we're working on right now. There's a series of talks. Izar Tarandak has done a set of talks on threat model every story. Back when he was at Autodesk, they released a bunch of the training material for that. It's good stuff. And then there's big wall maps. I'll talk about those on the next slide. As we talk about our deliverables, having a sample of this is the sort of diagram we expect to see at this stage really helps set people's expectations about the level of quality that you're looking for, the level of refinement, the level of review, which should be low. You want these things to come in early on while there's time to make changes to the systems that are being developed. You want to align the deliverables to the 4 questions of threat modeling. So a deliverable is what are we working on here? A deliverable is a set of answers to what are the questions or what can, a deliverable is a set of answers to the question, what can go wrong? That might just be a list. And then later on, as we figure out what are we going to do about it, we write bugs for each of those things. And you want to think very explicitly about what skills do people need to answer these questions well. So does the security team have design skills or penetration testing skills? I know where that falls today. Does the development, the ops team, the SRE team have security skills? If you know the answers to these questions, you can think about appropriate focused training to help people deliver the skills they need to do these things. Let me speak about big wall maps, which is another part of the technical approach to threat modeling. When we're in offices, the space on the walls is a super limited resource that we can think about, and we think about how do we budget it. And we use that wall space to show what's important to us. We put Kanban boards on it. We put Scrum boards on it to generate shared awareness. And in a shared office space, we can also create a big wall map of the software. And as we threat model, we can go up to that wall map and we can say, hey, my story adds a line between these two components. I need to think about how that could be spoofed, tampered, repudiated, etc. Or my story doesn't change this. I'm just changing an algorithm we're using on the same data. Ooh, but I should think about how I'm parsing the data that I get from this database because I see that it's on the far side of a trust boundary. And so this is easier, frankly, when we're all in a shared space, and that's not the case today. But we can emulate it. We can build these maps. We can show what the system overall looks like. And in doing so, we reduce redesign work. And we keep everyone focused on there's a method to the madness. You should know how your system fits in to the big picture. The organizational fixes to BMAD. First, know who delivers what to whom. And some of these deliverables, like the models of a system, can be collaborative. It can be the security team works with the developer to build a quick model of the system. You should know if your team, if your security team, if your organization thinks about early and often as a win, we want to invest the energy in it, or it's a waste. No, bring us a diagram. We're okay with the conflict. We're okay with treating this as a review, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you also have to think about how much design work can the security team really do? How many engagements do you have? What's the time per engagement? Are we staffed to meet these goals? And how do we balance this with other tasks? I believe that threat modeling is the most important work I do. And I say that as someone who helped create the CVE, and I'm on the review board for Black Hat. And I think threat modeling is the work that generates all of the other investments I make in securing products, systems, and designs. And so I believe that this works. I believe that it can be taught and that you ought to be doing it. Then there's the interpersonal Jenga building blocks as we respond to the BMAD problem, the bring me a diagram problem. So are we going to have a design collaboration or a design review? That's a choice that your organization can make, is making, and either you're making it consciously or accidentally. Communicating expectations both organizationally and as part of every meeting is really important. Saying things like, this is going to be a collaborative meeting, we're going to spend about an hour, or maybe we're going to spend 5 minutes developing a system model. We'll work through what can go wrong as it's natural, but we're going to come back and do that later. Our goal here is to have a good system model. Or maybe you're going to say, this is a design review meeting. 1 out of 10 of these have no stop issues, or 8 out of 10 of them. That number is really important for setting expectations and having people anticipate what's going to happen. And so with that, I want to say thank you for your time, for your attention. And I want to encourage you to avoid naively saying the words, bring me a diagram. It's going to lead to problems. Couple of resources for you as I take questions. A group of 15 experts in threat modeling recently released a manifesto for threat modeling. The thinking in this talk really ties to that. We thought about ways to reduce conflict to make threat modeling effective. It's short, it's easy to read, it's Creative Commons at threatmodelingmanifesto.org. And there's associates.showstack.org/whitepapers, where you can see the Jenga white paper. With that, if you're here at Black Hat Asia, I am happy to take questions. If you're not, here's my email, adam@showstack.org. Shoot me an email. Talk to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to take questions and talk about threat modeling. Thank you.